A kid in 1986 strapped a calculator to his wrist, wore a shirt that changed color every time he sweated, and paid $4 a minute to call a phone number that told jokes. His mother thought every single one of those things was perfectly reasonable. The 1980s did not just have trends. The 1980s had obsessions, full-blown national fixations that burned white-hot, emptied wallets, and then vanished so completely that explaining them out loud in 2026 makes you sound like you are describing a different planet. Number 42 on this list turned a cartoon character into something closer to a religion. Number 17 involved millions of Americans standing in a line that stretched from coast to coast, holding hands. And number 7 convinced an entire generation of adults that squeezing a metal butterfly between their thighs would give them the body of a Greek statue. So hit subscribe and settle in, because here are 100 strange 1980s obsessions that swept America. Number 100. Hypercolor shirts. In the late 1980s, a company called Genera released a t-shirt that changed color when you touched it. The fabric was treated with thermochromic dye, which meant the shirt shifted from one shade to another wherever heat made contact. Your handprint stayed visible on someone's back for a full minute after you pulled it away. Armpit stains glowed a completely different shade from the rest of the shirt, advertising your body temperature to everyone in the room. Teenagers paid around $20 for the privilege of broadcasting exactly where they were sweating. The shirts sold in the millions during their first year, and then the dye stopped working after a handful of washes, leaving behind a faded, blotchy garment that changed color in all the wrong places or not at all. Within 2 years, Genera filed for bankruptcy. Nobody had considered that a shirt designed to react to heat might not survive a clothes dryer set to high. Number 99. The rat tail haircut. The entire head was trimmed short except for one thin strand of hair at the nape of the neck, left to grow as long as possible. It hung down like a rope between the shoulder blades, sometimes braided, sometimes loose, always visible. Barbers cut it on request without comment. Parents approved it without hesitation. School photos from 1987 are full of children who look perfectly ordinary from the front and then turn around to reveal a single strand dangling past their collar like a biological antenna. The rat tail cut across every demographic. Boys in suburban cul-de-sacs had them. So did professional baseball players, construction workers, and middle school principals. It carried no particular meaning. It signified nothing. It was not associated with any subculture, any music genre, or any philosophical stance. And yet for roughly 5 years, millions of Americans looked at a child with a single long tail of hair hanging from an otherwise normal head and thought, that looks just fine. Number 98. Crimped hair. The process involved clamping a heated iron over small sections of hair, one section at a time, pressing a zigzag pattern into each strand from root to tip. A full head took 45 minutes to an hour, depending on thickness and length. The result looked like someone had braided their hair wet, slept on it overnight, and then brushed it out into a massive frizzy curtain that added 3 inches of volume in every direction. Crimping irons were sold alongside regular curling irons. Irons at every drugstore in the country, and the look appeared everywhere from prom photos to office Christmas parties to church on Sunday morning. The effort-to-result ratio was staggering. An hour of careful heat application to achieve a look that could have been replicated by sleeping on a damp pillowcase with tight braids. By 1990, the crimping iron had been quietly retired to the back of the bathroom cabinet, and the look had vanished so completely that young people today do not believe it was real until they see the photographs. Number 97. Jam shorts. They hit in 1985, and within a single summer they were everywhere. Jams were knee-length, loose-fitting shorts covered in the loudest tropical prints the textile industry could produce. Parrots, hibiscus flowers, neon palm trees, abstract geometric explosions in colors that existed nowhere in nature. They were originally surf shorts from a small Hawaiian company, but the mainland adopted them so aggressively that by 1986 you could find them in Sears hanging next to the khakis. Kids wore them to school. Fathers wore them to barbecues. Some men wore them to the office on casual Fridays with dress shoes and tube socks pulled up to the knee, which was a look that somehow escaped comment at the time. They cost around $15 to $20 and came in patterns so loud they were visible from across a parking lot and could probably be detected by satellite. The fad burned out by 1988, replaced by whatever came next, but for 3 consecutive summers, half of America dressed like it lived on a coral reef and saw nothing unusual about it. Number 96. The popped collar. The move was simple. You wore a polo shirt and flipped the collar straight up so it stood around your neck like a funnel. 1 popped collar was standard. 2 popped collars, layering one polo over another with both collars up, was advanced. 3 layered polos with 3 popped collars was not unheard of at certain East Coast colleges. The look started at prep schools and spread nationwide through movies and music television, carried by actors and musicians who wore it with a confidence that suggested the collar was up on purpose and not because of a laundry accident. It signaled confidence, wealth, or at least the intention to signal both. Nobody questioned why a collar designed to lie flat was being forced upright. Nobody asked what purpose it served against wind, sun, or any other element a collar might reasonably protect against. It just looked like the 1980s, and that was enough. Number 95. Banana clips. A curved, interlocking hair clip shaped roughly like a banana. You gathered your hair at the back of your head, clamped the banana clip over the gathered mass, and let the ends fan out above it like a fountain or a palm tree. The result was a spray of hair erupting from the back of the skull that bounced with every step. Working women wore them in offices alongside blazers and pearls. Teenagers wore them to dances. The clips came in every color and material, from plain black plastic to rhinestone-encrusted versions that cost $10 at the department store jewelry counter. They broke constantly, usually snapping in half during the middle of the day with a sound like a plastic gunshot, and the teeth left dents in the hair that lasted for hours. Replacing a broken banana clip was so common that most women kept a spare in their purse, the way drivers keep a spare tire in the trunk. Number 94. Slap bracelets. A flat strip of flexible spring steel covered in fabric or holographic paper. You held it straight, slapped it against your wrist, and it curled around your arm on contact. The snap was satisfying, the speed was startling, and the edges of cheaper versions could cut skin if the fabric covering wore thin, which it always did. Schools started banning them by 1990 after reports of the fabric wearing off and exposing the metal strip underneath, which turned the bracelet from a fashion accessory into a blade strapped to a child's arm. At their peak, children wore 6 or 7 on the same arm, stacked from wrist to mid-forearm, each one in a different color or pattern. They cost about $1 each and broke within a week. The entire product cycle, from introduction to mass enthusiasm to school-wide banning, took less than 2 years. No toy in the 1980s rose faster or fell harder. Number 93. Friendship bracelets. The craft required embroidery floss in multiple colors, a safety pin attached to the knee of your jeans to hold the work in place, and anywhere from 30 minutes to several hours of careful knotting. Patterns ranged from simple chevrons to elaborate diamonds and spirals that required following a diagram and counting rows. The finished bracelet was tied onto a friend's wrist and was never supposed to be removed. It stayed on through showers, swimming pools, soccer practice, and sleep until it fell apart on its own, which could take months. Summer camps ran on friendship bracelets. Sleepovers revolved around them. Recess was spent making them. Some kids had arms covered from wrist to elbow in faded, fraying thread, each bracelet representing a different friend, a different summer, or a different afternoon spent sitting cross-legged on a bedroom floor. The materials cost almost nothing, but the time investment was enormous, and the social pressure to reciprocate when someone tied one on your wrist was absolute and immediate. Number 92. The Rubik's Cube. In 1980, a Hungarian architecture professor's puzzle arrived in American toy stores and immediately broke the country's brain. The cube had 6 faces, each a different color, and the goal was to twist and turn the rows until every face was a solid color again. It sounded simple. It was not. The cube had over 43 quintillion possible configurations and exactly one solution. Within 2 years, over 100 million cubes had been sold worldwide. Secretaries kept them on their desks. Truck drivers kept them on their dashboards. An entire competitive subculture emerged around solving it as fast as possible, and tournaments drew crowds. Books explaining solution algorithms became bestsellers. A 12-year-old boy in Los Angeles solved it in under 30 seconds on national television and became a minor celebrity overnight. The obsession spawned knockoffs, sequels, a Saturday morning cartoon, and a level of cultural saturation that no single toy had achieved since the hula hoop. Rubik's Cube keychains hung from backpacks. Rubik's Cube posters hung in dorm rooms. A Rubik's Cube World Championship was organized in Budapest in 1982, and contestants flew in from dozens of countries to race each other in front of cameras. People who could not solve it peeled the stickers off and rearranged them, which technically counted as cheating, but was practiced so widely it became its own running joke. Some owners disassembled the cube entirely, rearranged the internal pieces by hand, and snapped it back together, which was an even more elaborate form of cheating that defeated the entire purpose of owning the thing. By 1983, the cube was fading from its peak, but for 3 years it consumed more collective American brainpower than any object that Small had any right to, and the sound of plastic clicking and turning was the background noise of an entire generation's childhood. Number 91. Cabbage Patch Kids. Each doll came with a birth certificate, an adoption paper, and a unique name generated by computer. You did not buy a Cabbage Patch Kid. You adopted one. Parents lined up before dawn outside department stores during the Christmas season of 1983, and the lines turned violent. Fistfights broke out in toy aisles. A store manager in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, was knocked to the ground and trampled. Some parents offered store employees cash bribes to hold a doll behind the counter. Others drove to neighboring states when their local stores sold out. The dolls were soft-bodied, yarn-haired, and had round faces that most adults privately described as homely. None of that mattered. The scarcity made them priceless, and the adoption framing made them feel like something more than a toy. Children carried them like real infants. Schools sent notes home asking parents not to let children bring their Cabbage Patch Kids to class because the dolls were causing disputes. By 1985, the frenzy had cooled, but the damage to holiday shopping dignity was permanent, and the memory of adults wrestling over stuffed dolls in a Kmart aisle lingered for a generation. Number 90. Teddy Ruxpin, an animatronic bear that read stories aloud. You inserted a cassette tape into a slot in its back, pressed play, and the bear's mouth and eyes moved in sync with the narration. The effect was somewhere between charming and deeply unsettling, depending on the child and the lighting in the room. Some children loved it and carried it everywhere. Others screamed at it and refused to be in the same room. When the batteries ran low, the mouth movements slowed down and fell out of sync with the voice, which made the bear look like it was having a medical event while continuing to speak in a calm, soothing tone. Teddy Ruxpin was the best-selling toy of 1985 and 1986, moving millions of units at a price that made it a premium gift. AC/DC tape produced a bear that appeared to be growling heavy metal lyrics while its eyes rolled slowly open and shut, which was either terrifying or hilarious depending on your age. Number 89. The Chia Pet, a hollow terracotta figurine that you soaked in water, smeared with chia seeds mixed into a paste, and watched sprout a coat of green fuzz over the next 2 weeks. The figurines were shaped like animals, cartoon characters, and human heads, and the sprouting seeds were meant to look like fur or hair. The result looked like a small ceramic creature slowly being consumed by moss. The jingle was inescapable. Cha-cha-cha. The product was sold almost exclusively during the holiday season as a novelty gift, and millions of Americans bought one, placed it on a windowsill, watered it daily, watched it sprout, watched it peak, watched it brown, and threw it away. It was never clear what you were supposed to do with a chia pet once the growing cycle was over. You could not eat it. You could not replant it. You could not display a dead chia pet without it looking like a crime scene. It just sat on the windowsill, slowly decomposing, until someone moved it to the trash and bought another one next Christmas. Number 88. The clapper. A plug-in device that turned lights and appliances on and off when you clapped twice. The commercial was everywhere, running between sitcom reruns and late-night talk shows. Clap on, clap off. The clapper. The pitch was freedom from light switches. The reality was that the device responded to any sharp sound, not just clapping. A dog barking turned the lamp on. A door slamming turned it off. A loud sneeze plunged the living room into darkness. The television itself, during an action scene with gunfire, could trigger a light show that nobody in the room had requested. Millions were sold anyway. People installed them on bedroom lamps and then spent the night fighting with the lamp every time the television volume crossed a threshold. The clapper turned a simple on-off switch into a negotiation with ambient noise, and somehow that was considered an improvement. Number 87. The Thigh Master. Suzanne Summers appeared in late-night infomercials holding a butterfly-shaped resistance device between her knees and squeezing. The pitch was that squeezing this device for a few minutes a day would sculpt your inner thighs into something worth looking at. The demonstration was simple. Open, close, open, close. The Thigh Master sold over 10 million units. It lived under couches, behind recliners, in closets, and wedged between bed frames and walls across America. Most owners used it enthusiastically for a week, sporadically for a month, and then found a permanent resting place for it somewhere out of direct sight. The infomercial ran for years, and Summers became so permanently associated with the product that she could not appear on television without someone mentioning thighs. The device itself worked. The muscles it targeted existed. Whether anyone used it long enough to see results was another question entirely. Number 86. Jane Fonda workout tapes. In 1982, Jane Fonda released a workout video cassette, and American living rooms turned into aerobic studios overnight. The tape sold over 17 million copies, making it the best-selling home video of its era. Fonda wore a striped leotard and leg warmers, and within months, millions of women across the country were wearing the same outfit in their own living rooms at 6 in the morning, high-kicking in front of the television set while their families ate cereal in the next room. The cultural shift was enormous. Before Fonda, exercise was something that happened at a gym or on a track. After Fonda, it happened in the den, between the coffee table and the bookshelf, with the volume turned up so the neighbors could hear the counting. The tape spawned an entire industry of celebrity workout videos. Everybody from football players to soap opera stars released their own version. Some were filmed in studios, others were filmed on beaches. A few were filmed in living rooms that looked suspiciously like the ones their viewers exercised in, which created a strange mirror effect of watching someone pretend to exercise at home while you actually exercised at home. The VCR became the personal trainer. A Hollywood actress became the most influential fitness figure in American history, and the living room became a space where sweat stains on the carpet were a sign of virtue rather than neglect. The leotard and leg warmer uniform never wavered. If you were going to sweat to a videotape in 1984, you dressed for it the same way you would dress for a stage performance. Nobody exercised in old t-shirts. The outfit was part of the commitment. Number 85. Richard Simmons and Sweating to the Oldies. Where Jane Fonda was sleek, disciplined, and commanding, Richard Simmons was sequined tank tops, short shorts, and tears. His workout videos featured real overweight people exercising to songs from the 1950s and 1960s, and they sold millions of copies. Simmons personally answered fan mail. He showed up unannounced at people's houses to encourage them. He cried on camera so often it became part of his brand, and his audiences cried with him. The man turned aerobics into group therapy with a soundtrack. He was everywhere in the 1980s, on talk shows, in airports hugging strangers, at grocery stores giving impromptu pep talks in the produce aisle, and nobody who met him ever forgot it. The tapes were gentle, the energy was relentless, and the emotional investment he demanded from his audience was unlike anything the fitness industry had ever seen or has seen since. Number 84. Koosh balls. A sphere made entirely of rubber filaments, roughly the size of a tennis ball, that looked like a sea urchin crossed with a cheerleader's pom-pom. It made a satisfying thwack when it landed in your hand and felt unlike any ball that had ever existed. It could not bounce predictably, roll in a straight line, or serve any traditional ball function. You could not play catch with it over any distance because it had the aerodynamics of a hedgehog. The koosh was invented by an engineer who wanted a ball soft enough for his young children to catch without fear, and by 1988 it had sold over 50 million units. Offices kept them on desks as stress relievers. Teachers used them as classroom rewards and attention-getting devices. Some people just sat and pulled the rubber strands apart, one by one, until the ball was bald and useless, which took about 20 minutes of determined picking. Number 83. My Buddy and Kid Sister Dolls. For the first time, a major toy company marketed a doll directly to boys. My Buddy was a soft-bodied boy doll in overalls and a baseball cap, and the television commercial showed young boys carrying it around, hugging it and taking it on adventures. The jingle was relentlessly catchy and followed anyone who heard it for the rest of their lives. My buddy, wherever you go, he goes. Kid Sister followed for girls with an equally persistent jingle. The dolls were wholesome, harmless, and mildly progressive for their era, normalizing the idea that boys could play with dolls without it meaning anything other than play. Then the horror movie Child's Play came out in 1988, featuring a murderous doll named Chucky that bore a suspicious visual resemblance to My Buddy, and the toy's sales collapsed virtually overnight. A doll designed to teach boys about nurturing became permanently associated with a fictional serial killer. The manufacturer denied any connection. Parents did not care. Number 82. Light Bright. A box with a light bulb inside, a black paper template on the front, and hundreds of small translucent colored pegs. You pushed the pegs through the paper following the pattern, turned off the room lights, and the result glowed like a stained glass window designed by a 5-year-old. The effect was genuinely magical in a dark room. In a lit room, it looked like a piece of black paper with plastic dots stuck in it. The pegs ended up everywhere, in carpet fibers, between couch cushions, embedded in the bottom of bare feet at 2 in the morning. Stepping on a light bright peg was a pain experience distinct from stepping on a Lego, sharper and more targeted, like a small translucent needle. Every household with a light bright accepted a certain level of ongoing foot puncture risk as the cost of art. The pegs were also small enough to be swallowed, which the packaging warned about in fine print that no child ever read. Number 81. Care Bears. Each bear was a different color and represented a different emotion or virtue. Tenderheart Bear was love. Grumpy Bear was, predictably, grumpy. Funshine Bear was happiness. They had symbols on their stomachs called belly badges that shot beams of caring energy at villains in the animated series, which operated on the premise that emotional sincerity was a literal weapon. The cartoon and toy line launched in 1983, and within 2 years, Care Bears were on lunchboxes, bed sheets, curtains, birthday cakes, roller skates, toothbrushes, and the side of a promotional blimp. The premise, that emotional well-being could be projected as a visible beam of light from a bear's stomach and used to defeat evil, was accepted without question by an entire generation of children who saw nothing unusual about weaponized feelings. The toys generated over $2 billion in retail sales during the decade, making caring one of the most profitable emotions in American consumer history. Number 80. Popples, stuffed animals that could be folded into their own pouches and turned into balls. You unrolled a popple, and it became a plush creature with enormous ears, a long tail, and a perpetually surprised expression. You rolled it back up, tucked everything into the built-in pouch on its back, and it became a round, portable lump that could be thrown, carried, or stuffed into a backpack. The engineering was clever. The appeal was a toy that transformed between two shapes, neither of which served any obvious purpose beyond the satisfaction of transformation itself. Kids spent more time folding and unfolding popples than actually playing with them in any traditional sense. They were popular enough to earn their own animated television series and a line of miniature versions, and they vanished almost as quickly as they arrived, leaving behind a generation of adults who can still remember the exact motion of tucking ears into a pouch. Number 79. Pound puppies. Plush dogs that came in cardboard boxes designed to look like dog pounds. Like Cabbage Patch Kids, you adopted them. Each one came with a name tag, an adoption certificate, and a small cardboard carrier that mimicked the look of an animal shelter kennel. The underlying message was oddly dark for a children's toy. These stuffed animals were pretending to be abandoned dogs in a shelter, and you were rescuing them from institutional neglect. The marketing worked beautifully. Pound puppies sold over 6 million units in 1986 alone. The cartoon that followed softened the premise considerably, turning the dogs into adventurous heroes rather than inmates. But the original concept, buying a toy whose entire emotional appeal was based on simulating the rescue of an animal from a cage, was strange territory for a plush dog. Children loved them anyway, and the adoption certificates were filled out with the same seriousness as the ones that came with Cabbage Patch Kids. Number 78. The Bedazzler, a hand-pressed tool that punched rhinestones and studs into fabric. The infomercial showed ordinary denim jackets, plain t-shirts, and canvas bags being transformed into sparkling, bedazzled masterpieces in under 5 minutes. The reality was that the rhinestones fell off in the wash, left small holes in the fabric, and scratched anything they came in contact with, including skin, furniture, and car seats. That did not stop millions of Americans from bedazzling everything they owned. Jean pockets, baseball caps, sneakers, backpacks, and in some ambitious cases, upholstery. The instructions suggested modest accents. Users applied rhinestones by the hundred. A bedazzled denim jacket weighed noticeably more than an unbedazzled one, and it sparkled under fluorescent lighting like a disco ball with sleeves. The Bedazzler turned craft night into a contact sport and left a generation of garments permanently perforated. Number 77. Iron-on transfers. You bought a sheet of heat-activated decals at a drugstore or novelty shop, placed it face down on a t-shirt, and pressed a hot iron over it for 30 seconds. The result was a custom t-shirt with a rainbow, a Garfield, a muscle car, or a phrase like "Born to Party" permanently fused to the front. The transfers cracked after a few washes. They peeled at the edges. They faded to a pale ghost of their original color within a month of regular wear. The iron temperature was critical. Too low, and the transfer would not stick. Too high, and the image warped into something unrecognizable. But for a brief window, every household iron doubled as a printing press, and every plain white t-shirt was a canvas waiting to happen. Garage sales and flea markets sold transfer sheets by the dozen, and the smell of a hot iron pressing onto cotton was the smell of custom fashion. Number 76. Collecting precious moments figurines. Small porcelain figures of children with teardrop-shaped eyes and oversized heads posed in scenes of prayer, friendship, and gentle melancholy. They were produced by UNESCO and based on the artwork of Sam Butcher. Collectors treated them like investments. Special editions were tracked in price guides. Retired pieces were traded at conventions. Some families had entire glass front display cabinets filled with nothing but precious moments figurines, each one carefully dusted and repositioned every week. At the peak of the craze, individual pieces resold for hundreds of dollars. By the time the market cooled, the figurines were worth a fraction of their original price, and thrift stores across America were drowning in tiny porcelain children with enormous sad eyes. Number 75. Pudding Pops. Frozen pudding on a stick, sold by Jell-O and promoted by Bill Cosby in television commercials that ran so frequently during after-school programming and Saturday mornings that they became part of the cultural background noise of the entire decade. The concept was simple enough to explain to a child and strange enough to confuse an adult. Take chocolate pudding, freeze it, put a wooden stick in it, and sell it in the freezer aisle next to the ice cream as if it were a completely different category of frozen treat. Kids treated them as an after-school staple. The texture was somewhere between ice cream and frozen mousse, denser than a popsicle and softer than a fudge bar, and it coated your tongue in a creamy film that regular popsicles never could. At their peak, Pudding Pops were in every freezer section in the country. The brand faded through the 1990s and was eventually discontinued, brought back, discontinued again, and brought back once more in a cycle of removal and return that suggested America could never fully let go of the idea of frozen pudding on a stick. Number 74. Crystal Light. Powdered drink mix marketed as the sophisticated alternative to Kool-Aid for women who cared about calories and wanted everyone to know it. The commercials featured women in leotards playing tennis, swimming laps, and generally being active while holding a tall glass of something that looked like lemonade but was actually water mixed with artificial sweetener and citric acid. Crystal Light was diet culture in a pitcher. It sat on kitchen counters in clear plastic pitchers beside the microwave and the toaster, and its presence meant that at least one person in the house was actively watching their weight and had decided that regular water was insufficient for the task. The flavors ranged from passable lemonade to something called tropical passion that tasted the way a tropical vacation might smell if you experienced it through a car air freshener. None of the flavors tasted like actual fruit. All of them tasted like what a laboratory imagined fruit might taste like if fruit were made entirely of saccharin and powdered citric acid. Millions of American women drank it daily for the entire decade and well into the next. Number 73. Pop Rocks Candy. Small packets of hard candy that crackled, popped, and fizzed on your tongue the moment they made contact with saliva. The carbon dioxide gas trapped inside the candy during manufacturing released on contact with moisture, producing a sensation in your mouth that was equal parts exciting, alarming, and impossible to describe to anyone who had not experienced it. An urban legend circulated through every elementary school in the country, claiming that a child named Little Mikey, the kid from the Life cereal commercial, had died after eating Pop Rocks and drinking a can of Coca-Cola at the same time, causing his stomach to rupture from the gas buildup. The story was entirely false. The manufacturer, General Foods, took out full-page newspaper advertisements to deny it. They sent letters to school principals across the country. They hired a hotline for concerned parents. None of it mattered. The rumor persisted for the entire decade and beyond, and every kid who ate Pop Rocks did so with the low-grade thrill of believing they might be doing something genuinely physically dangerous. Number 72. Jell-O molds at every social gathering. No potluck, church supper, neighborhood barbecue, or holiday dinner in the 1980s was complete without at least one elaborately shaped gelatin creation sitting on the table, trembling slightly whenever someone walked past. Ring molds were the most common shape, but ambitious cooks used molds shaped like fish, bundt cakes, hearts, and 5-pointed stars. The gelatin came in every color of the spectrum, from electric red to emerald green to a shade of orange that existed nowhere in nature. Some versions had canned fruit cocktails suspended inside like insects in amber. Others contained cottage cheese, shredded carrots, celery, or miniature marshmallows. The combination of lime gelatin and cottage cheese was presented without irony as a salad, placed on the table next to actual salad, and consumed by adults who appeared to see nothing contradictory about calling a wobbling green dessert with dairy chunks a vegetable course. Nobody questioned this. The mold sat on the buffet table glistening and wobbling, and guests served themselves a quivering slice as if it were a perfectly normal food, because in the 1980s it was. Number 71. Fruit roll-ups. Thin sheets of dried fruit paste wrapped around a strip of cellophane, packaged in brightly colored boxes with cartoon characters on the front, and packed into school lunchboxes as proof that your parents cared enough to buy the good snacks. Kids unrolled them slowly, pressed them against the roof of their mouth with their tongue, and let them dissolve. Some kids cut shapes out of them with scissors before eating, which was an activity promoted on the packaging itself. Others wrapped them around their fingers like edible rings, which was not promoted but was practiced universally. The ingredients list bore only a distant relationship to actual fruit. Sugar, corn syrup, and fruit concentrate from concentrate appeared in that order. But the marketing convinced an entire generation of parents that fruit roll-ups were a healthy alternative to candy because the word fruit was in the name and there was a picture of a strawberry on the box. They were not healthy. They were candy, with better branding and a cellophane backing. Number 70. The McRib. McDonald's introduced a boneless pork patty pressed into the shape of a miniature rack of ribs, doused in barbecue sauce, topped with raw onions and dill pickles, and served on a 6-inch hoagie roll. The meat was molded to look like it had bones, complete with ridges pressed into the surface to simulate ribs, even though it contained no bones at all. The illusion fooled nobody and delighted everybody who ate one. McDonald's pulled it from the menu after its initial run, brought it back a few years later, pulled it again, brought it back, and repeated the cycle for decades. Each return was treated as a minor cultural event. People tracked McRib sightings across different regions the way birdwatchers track rare migrations. Fan websites published McRib locator maps. A sandwich made of restructured pork shoulder somehow achieved the status of a seasonal delicacy, appearing and disappearing according to a schedule that nobody outside the McDonald's Corporation fully understood, and the temporary nature of its availability was the single most effective piece of marketing the company never intended to create. Number 69. The Book It program. Pizza Hut partnered with elementary schools across the country to bribe children into reading by offering free pizza as a reward. Every student who read a certain number of books each month received a gold star on a button pinned to their shirt, and when the button was full, they earned a certificate redeemable for one free personal pan pizza at their local Pizza Hut. The program launched in 1984, and within a year it was in elementary schools from coast to coast. Kids who had never voluntarily opened a book suddenly devoured chapter books, picture books, and anything else that qualified at a pace that surprised their teachers and alarmed their librarians. Whether they retained any of what they read was debatable and largely beside the point. What was not debatable was that the promise of a small pepperoni pizza in a personal-sized pan was a more effective motivator than any teacher's encouragement, any parent's nagging, any gold star on a report card, or any reading list ever distributed by a school district. Number 68. Capri Sun. Juice sealed in a foil pouch with a tiny yellow straw glued to the side. The straw was sharp enough to puncture the pouch, but thin enough that inserting it correctly required the fine motor skills and steady hand of a surgeon performing a delicate procedure. Dabbed too hard and the straw went through both sides of the pouch, spraying juice across the cafeteria table and anyone sitting across from you. Stabbed too softly and the straw crumpled against the foil, bending uselessly and requiring a second attempt that almost always went worse than the first. Stab at the wrong angle and the straw slid off the entry point and punctured your thumb. Every child who drank a Capri Sun in the 1980s had at least one catastrophic insertion failure that ended with sticky hands, a wet shirt, and a small puddle of artificially flavored liquid on a cafeteria table. The juice inside was mostly water, sugar, and a small amount of fruit concentrate, but the packaging made it feel like a space-age beverage delivered through proprietary technology. You were not drinking juice. You were performing a controlled puncture. Number 67. Microwave cookbooks. The microwave oven arrived in American kitchens in the late 1970s and early 1980s, and the country immediately treated it as a complete replacement for every other cooking appliance ever invented. Entire cookbooks, some of them hundreds of pages long, were written around the premise that you could cook a full Thanksgiving dinner, including the turkey, using nothing but a microwave oven, microwave bacon, microwave scrambled eggs, microwave roast beef that came out gray and uniformly rubbery, microwave brownies that emerged with the texture and structural integrity of a damp sponge. The cookbooks sold in the millions because the microwave was not just a convenience appliance for reheating leftovers, it was the future of cooking itself, and the future, according to these books, meant never turning on a stove or preheating an oven again. The results were consistently disappointing, uniformly gray, and texturally suspicious, but the optimism was relentless. If it could be heated, someone somewhere published a microwave recipe for it and declared the results excellent. Number 66. Snack Pack Pudding Cups. Individual-sized plastic cups of chocolate or vanilla pudding, each one sealed with a foil lid that peeled back to reveal a smooth, unnaturally glossy surface. No spoon was included. You were expected to bring your own, or eat it with your finger, which most children did without hesitation. The foil lid was a weapon in the wrong hands. Peel it back too fast and pudding splattered across the cafeteria table. Peel it back too slowly and the seal tore unevenly, leaving a jagged aluminum ring that cut fingers. Snack packs appeared in lunchboxes as a status symbol. Having one meant your household invested in pre-portioned desserts rather than buying a single large container and spooning it out at home. The pudding inside was shelf-stable, which meant it could sit in a pantry for months without refrigeration, a fact that nobody in the 1980s thought to question, but that sounds deeply suspicious when you say it out loud today. Number 65. The 1 to 900 number craze. For a few dollars per minute, anyone with a telephone could call a 1 to 900 number and hear a recorded joke, a horoscope, a bedtime story, a weather report, or a professional wrestler trash-talking into a receiver. The phone bill arrived weeks later, and parents across the country discovered that their children had spent $30 or $40 listening to a robot tell knock-knock jokes. Some 1 to 900 lines featured celebrities. You could call and hear your favorite soap opera star give a personal message that was not personal at all, but was read from a script and played on a loop for every caller. Professional wrestlers had their own lines. Cartoon characters had their own lines. Santa Claus had a 1 to 900 number during the holiday season, and children called it believing they were speaking to the actual North Pole. The industry peaked in the late 1980s and generated hundreds of millions of dollars annually. The business model was elegant in its simplicity. Charge someone $3 or $4 a minute for something that had no physical form, no lasting value, and no replay capability. It was one of the first pay-per-use content models in American consumer history, except you paid per minute and received nothing you could hold, keep, or show to anyone. The content ranged from mildly entertaining to completely worthless, but the billing was relentless. When itemized phone bills became standard and parents realized the scale of the charges, entire households erupted. Grounding followed. Phone privileges were revoked, and the 1 to 900 industry, which had built a fortune on the gap between a child's curiosity and a parent's awareness, collapsed under the weight of its own billing statements. Number 64. Dial-a-joke phone lines. Before 1 to 900 numbers went national and made pay-per-call entertainment a corporate industry, local dial-a-joke lines operated on regular telephone numbers in cities and towns across the country. You picked up the phone, dialed the number, listened to a recorded joke that lasted about 20 to 30 seconds, hung up, and called back 5 minutes later hoping the joke had rotated. Some cities had multiple competing dial-a-joke lines, each one promising funnier material than the last. The quality ranged from mildly amusing to painfully unfunny, with most jokes landing somewhere in the territory of what your uncle would tell at a family gathering after 2 beers. Busy signals were constant because hundreds of people were calling the same number at the same time. Kids called from the kitchen phone while their parents were at work, racking up long-distance charges if the joke line happened to be in another area code, which it frequently was. The idea that someone would pick up a telephone, physically dial a 7-digit or 10-digit number, wait through several rings, and then listen to a stranger read a joke into a tape recorder now sounds like a plot from a science fiction comedy, but in 1985 it was a perfectly normal way to spend a Tuesday afternoon. Number 63. Phone psychics. Call a number, pay $3 or $4 a minute, and a stranger on the other end of the line would tell you about your future using tarot cards, astrology charts, crystal vibrations, or pure improvisation aided by a notepad. The late-night infomercials for psychic hotlines ran constantly on cable television, and the host always seemed to know something startlingly specific about the caller on the other end, which was considerably less impressive once you realized that the caller had been on hold for 20 minutes providing personal details, including their birthday, relationship status, and reason for calling, to a screener before being connected to the psychic. The bills were staggering. Some regular callers, many of them lonely, isolated, or going through difficult life transitions, spent hundreds of dollars a month seeking guidance from people they had never met and would never meet in person. The industry generated enormous revenue before it was eventually investigated by regulators and largely dismantled. But for a solid stretch of the late 1980s and into the early 1990s, a significant number of Americans made major life decisions, including career changes, marriages, and financial moves, based on advice purchased from a stranger at $4 a minute. Number 62. Baby on board car signs. A bright yellow diamond-shaped sign suctioned to the rear window of every minivan, station wagon, and wood-paneled family vehicle in America. The sign was originally designed by a safety consultant to alert emergency responders that a child might be inside the car after an accident, a purpose that was immediately and completely lost the moment the sign became commercially available. Parents hung them as a declaration of their status. Other drivers mocked them. Parody signs followed within months and proliferated wildly. Baby on board became dog on mother-in-law in trunk, ex-husband in trunk, and nobody on board, which rather defeated the original purpose. The original signs sold over 1 million units in their first 6 months on the market. The backlash signs sold nearly as well. An entire micro-industry of automotive rear window communication was born, flourished, became a punchline, and died within the span of about 3 years. Number 61. Garfield suction cup to car windows. A plush or plastic Garfield the cat, arms and legs spread wide, attached to the inside of a car window by suction cups on its paws. At the peak of the fad in the mid-1980s, roughly 1 in 3 cars on certain American highways appeared to have an orange cartoon cat clinging to the glass. Jim Davis, the cartoonist who created Garfield, had licensed the character for every conceivable product. Garfield was on lunchboxes, bed sheets, coffee mugs, telephones shaped like the cat with the receiver resting on its head, alarm clocks shaped like the cat with its eyes as the hour and minute displays, and a car window toy that served absolutely no function beyond announcing that the driver liked a comic strip about a lazy cat who hated Mondays. The licensing empire generated hundreds of millions of dollars. The suction cup Garfield was just one product in an ocean of Garfield merchandise, but it was the most visible. You could not drive on an interstate highway in 1986 without seeing a dozen of them pressed against rear windows, their orange bodies flattened against the glass, their plastic grins frozen in permanent amusement. The suction cups failed in heat. Garfield would peel off the glass and fall behind the back seat, where he would remain for years, gathering dust and melting slightly against the upholstery in summer. Replacing the suction cups was possible but rarely attempted. Most people just left Garfield where he fell and bought a new one. By 1990, the window Garfields were gone from car windows but still lodged behind back seats in station wagons and sedans across all 50 states. A tiny orange monument to a fad that had no reason to exist and no intention of explaining itself. Number 60. Max Headroom. A fictional artificial intelligence television host with a glitchy, stuttering voice and a computer-generated face that was not actually computer. Character was played by a human actor wearing prosthetic makeup and filmed against a rotating geometric background. Max Headroom hosted a talk show, appeared in Coca-Cola commercials, and became a pop culture phenomenon without most viewers understanding what he was supposed to be. The character existed in a space between satire and product placement that felt uncomfortable and futuristic at the same time. In 1987, someone hijacked a Chicago television signal and broadcast a person wearing a Max Headroom mask mumbling incoherently for 30 seconds. The hijacker was never caught. The incident remains one of the strangest unsolved broadcasting events in American history. Number 59. The "Where's the Beef" phenomenon. In January 1984, a fast food chain called Wendy's ran a 30-second television commercial featuring an elderly woman named Clara Peller, a retired manicurist from Chicago, peering at a comically oversized hamburger bun with an almost microscopically small meat patty inside and demanding, with genuine indignation, to know where the beef was. The phrase entered the American vocabulary overnight and stayed there for the rest of the year. Politicians used it in debates, comedians used it on stage, bumper stickers appeared, t-shirts were printed by the tens of thousands. Walter Mondale used the phrase during a Democratic presidential primary debate to question the substance of Gary Hart's policy proposals, and the audience laughed so hard the moderator had to wait for the room to settle. A three-word catchphrase from a fast food commercial became a legitimate tool of political rhetoric in a presidential race. Clara Peller became famous, earned a reported salary for her appearances, was fired by Wendy's after appearing in a competing commercial for Prego pasta sauce, and the phrase gradually faded from daily use but never fully left the American language. Number 58. Help, send someone, entering everyday speech. A medical alert company called LifeCall ran a television commercial in 1989 featuring an elderly woman named Mrs. Fletcher lying on the kitchen floor after a fall, pressing a button on a pendant around her neck and delivering the line with enough sincerity and vulnerability to break your heart. America's response was to turn it into a punchline. Kids yelled it on playgrounds during tag. Comedians used it in stand-up routines. It appeared on t-shirts, bumper stickers, and greeting cards. The phrase was referenced in sitcoms and movies. The commercial was designed to sell a genuinely life-saving product to elderly people living alone and at risk of falls, and the overwhelming public response was to turn a vulnerable woman's plea for help into the most repeated joke of the year and a catchphrase that persisted for well over a decade. The company eventually changed its name and redesigned its advertising entirely, but the phrase outlived the company, the commercial, and the product itself. Number 57. Pac-Man Fever. The arcade game launched in 1980, and by 1982 there were hundreds of thousands of Pac-Man machines installed in arcades, pizza parlors, laundromats, gas stations, and grocery store lobbies across the United States. The character appeared on cereal boxes, lunch boxes, bed sheets, board games, Halloween costumes, chewable vitamins, and a top 40 hit single called Pac-Man Fever by Buckner and Garcia that climbed the Billboard charts and received heavy radio rotation. A Saturday morning cartoon series followed. So did Miss Pac-Man, Baby Pac-Man, and a line of pasta shaped like the character that sat in grocery aisles next to the regular macaroni, as if a yellow circle eating dots were a perfectly normal shape for food. A simple yellow circle that ate dots and was chased by ghosts became one of the most recognized figures in American popular culture, outselling many established entertainment brands in merchandise revenue. The obsession was so intense and so commercially saturated that the crash that followed, when the arcade industry collapsed in 1983 from oversaturation, felt less like a market correction and more like a national hangover. Number 56. The Smurf merchandise explosion. Small, blue, fictional creatures that lived in mushroom-shaped houses and spoke in a language where every other word was replaced by the word Smurf. They smurfed their way to the Smurf store, They had a Smurfy day. The cartoon debuted in 1981, and within 2 years the Smurfs were on over 1,000 licensed products. Smurf drinking glasses at fast food restaurants. Smurf figurines at gas stations sold as collectibles. Smurf ice cream bars with blue-dyed vanilla that turned children's mouths and tongues a disturbing shade of blue. Smurf sleeping bags, toothbrushes, roller skates, and breakfast cereals. The merchandise saturation was so extreme and so rapid that by 1985, consumer fatigue set in and the franchise contracted almost as fast as it had expanded. But during the peak years, it was nearly impossible to move through an American retail store without encountering a 3-apple-tall blue creature wearing a white hat staring at you from a product shelf. Number 55. Breakdancing on flattened cardboard boxes. The art form migrated from the Bronx to the rest of the country through movies like Breakin' and Beat Street, through music videos, and through sheer visual spectacle that could not be ignored. By 1984, kids in suburban driveways across America were dragging refrigerator boxes out of dumpsters behind appliance stores, flattening them on concrete or asphalt, and attempting head spins, windmills, and freezes that sent them to the emergency room with sprained wrists and rug burns that were technically concrete burns. The cardboard served as both dance floor and crash pad. Without it, the pavement would have ground through clothing and skin in seconds. Breakdancing appeared in Pepsi commercials, Saturday morning cartoons, and the closing ceremony of the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. A dance form that originated in block parties and community centers in New York City had become so mainstream that your neighbor's 12-year-old in suburban Ohio was practicing windmills in the garage, while his mother watched through the kitchen window and wondered where he had learned to spin on his head. Number 54. Boomboxes carried on shoulders in public. A portable stereo the size of a small suitcase, powered by 8 or 10 D-cell batteries that lasted about 4 hours at full volume, hoisted onto one shoulder and blasted while walking down the street. The boombox was a personal sound system imposed on everyone within a 2-block radius, whether they liked it or not. Some models weighed over 20 pounds. Carrying one for any distance required genuine physical effort, a strong shoulder, and a complete disregard for the auditory preferences of every stranger within earshot. The bigger the boombox, the higher the status. Some models were so large they came with carrying handles on both sides, like luggage. Cities began passing noise ordinances, specifically targeting portable stereos. New York City briefly banned them on the subway. None of it stopped the practice. The boombox was not about listening to music in private. It was about making everyone else listen to your music in public, and that distinction was the entire point. Number 53. Collecting scratch and sniff stickers. Stickers embedded with micro-encapsulated fragrance oils that released a scent when you scratched the surface with a fingernail. Pizza-scented stickers. Grape-scented stickers. A sticker that was supposed to smell like a new car but smelled more like a chemical spill in a parking garage. Teachers used them as rewards on homework and spelling tests. Kids traded them like currency at recess, with rare scents commanding premium exchange rates. Some children accumulated entire albums filled with hundreds of stickers arranged by category. Each one scratched so many times the scent was gone and the surface was worn smooth, but the pride of ownership remained. The smell quality varied wildly. Some stickers smelled exactly like what they promised. Others smelled like a laboratory's best guess at what a thing might smell like if the laboratory had never actually encountered the thing, which was somehow more disturbing than if they had smelled like nothing at all. Number 52. Troll dolls. Naked rubber figurines about 3 inches tall with wild, brightly colored hair standing straight up from their heads, blank staring eyes, a wide grin, and a round potbelly. They wore no clothing. They had no accessories. They were, by any objective measure, odd-looking objects to collect in large numbers, and yet the 1980s revival turned them into a full-blown craze. Kids collected dozens and lined them up on bookshelves and windowsills. Some adults kept them on car dashboards, office desks, and bathroom counters as good luck charms, which meant that a significant number of American workplaces had a naked rubber figurine with neon pink hair smiling at customers from behind a computer monitor. The hair came in every color imaginable. The facial expression never changed. The fact that millions of Americans voluntarily surrounded themselves with grinning, nude, wild-haired rubber creatures and considered it a perfectly normal decorating choice is, in retrospect, one of the stranger aesthetic decisions of the decade. Number 51. Lisa Frank Everything. Every school supply a child could own, covered in day-glow rainbow illustrations of dolphins jumping over rainbows, unicorns galloping in front of neon sunsets, kittens wearing sunglasses, and pandas floating through galaxies. Lisa Frank folders, notebooks, pencil cases, erasers, sticker sheets, and trapper-keeper inserts dominated elementary school classrooms from the mid-1980s onward. The color palette was aggressive to the point of confrontational. Purples, pinks, electric blues, and yellows so bright they were almost painful to look at under fluorescent classroom lighting. Nothing in the Lisa Frank universe existed in a natural color. Every animal glowed. Every sky was sunset. Every surface sparkled. The brand operated out of a massive factory in Tucson, Arizona, and at its peak employed hundreds of artists producing an endless stream of sparkly, rainbow-saturated imagery that defined what it meant to be a girl with a school folder in suburban America. The factory reportedly had a pink marble lobby and a candy room, which may or may not have been true, but was entirely consistent with the brand's approach to reality. Number 50. Betamax versus VHS. Two incompatible videotape formats fighting for control of the American living room in a format war that divided households, stranded early adopters, and established a template for every technology battle that followed. Sony's Betamax was technically superior by most objective measures. The picture was sharper, the cassette was smaller and more elegant, and the recording quality was noticeably higher when compared side by side on the same television. JVC's VHS was cheaper to manufacture, recorded for significantly longer on a single tape, and had far more movies available for rent at the video stores that were opening on every commercial strip in the country. Families chose sides the way they chose political parties. Buying a Betamax player in 1982 meant committing to a format that half the video rental store did not carry and that most of your friends could not play. Buying VHS meant accepting slightly worse picture quality in exchange for convenience, availability, and the ability to record an entire football game without changing tapes. The format war divided households, stranded early adopters with useless equipment they could not trade or sell, and established the pattern that would repeat with Laserdisc versus DVD, HD DVD versus Blu-ray, and every other incompatible media format for the next 4 decades. Betamax was officially discontinued years later, a technological superior that lost the market, and the sting of choosing the wrong side never fully healed for the families who had invested hundreds of dollars in a format the world quietly decided not to use. Number 49. Recording songs off the radio with a cassette recorder. The process required patience, timing, and a willingness to accept imperfection as a permanent condition of your music collection. You sat beside the radio, often for hours, with your finger hovering over the record button on a cassette deck or a portable tape recorder, waiting for your favorite song to start playing. The moment you heard the opening notes, you lunged for the button and pressed record. If you were lucky, you caught the song from the very beginning. If you were not, and you usually were not, the first 3 to 5 seconds of the recording were the disc jockey talking over the intro or the tail end of a commercial for a car dealership. The end of the song was always a gamble. Sometimes you got the full fade out with a clean finish. Sometimes the DJ started talking before the last note finished, stepping on the ending with a station identification or a comment about the weather. The result was a cassette tape filled with songs of varying audio quality, each one bookended by fragments of radio chatter, off-air silence, commercials, and the occasional background sound of someone in the kitchen asking what was for dinner or a dog barking in the next room. Number 48. The Epilady. An electric hair removal device from Israel that hit the American market in 1986 and immediately became one of the most talked about and most dreaded personal grooming products ever sold. The device worked by trapping individual hairs between rotating metal coils and ripping them out of the skin at the root, one at a time, at high speed. The commercial showed women gliding it over smooth, tanned legs while smiling serenely, as if the experience were as gentle as applying moisturizer. The reality involved tears, involuntary screaming, and a mechanical grinding noise that sounded like a small motor chewing through gravel and hair simultaneously. The Epilady was marketed as a revolution in personal grooming, a permanent alternative to shaving. Millions were sold in the first year. Most were used exactly once. The pain was so intense and so memorable that online forums decades later still feature people describing their childhood memories of hearing their mother's curse from behind a locked bathroom door. It remains one of the most aggressively unpleasant consumer products ever marketed with a straight face and a smile. Number 47. The Laserdisc. A video disc the size of a vinyl record that played movies with better picture and sound quality than VHS. The players were expensive, often costing several $100s at a time when a decent VCR cost under $200. The discs were heavy, fragile, could not be recorded on, and had to be flipped over halfway through the movie because each side only held about an hour of footage. Man, a 2-hour film required getting up from the couch, opening the player, physically lifting the disc out, turning it over, placing it back in the tray, closing the player, and pressing play again. The pause broke the immersion every single time. There was no fast-forwarding through the flip. There was no skipping it. You simply accepted that the middle of every movie included a mandatory intermission during which you stood in your living room holding a disc the size of a dinner plate and wondering if VHS people had a point. Laserdisc owners were vocal about the superior quality and openly dismissive of VHS owners who claimed they could not see the difference on a 27-inch television set. They organized viewing parties. They compared transfer quality between different pressings of the same film. They discussed the relative merits of CAV versus CLV encoding with a passion normally reserved for religious doctrine or sports rivalries. The format never captured more than a small fraction of the American market, but the people who owned Laserdiscs formed one of the most devoted and least understood consumer subcultures of the decade. They bought special cleaning kits, stored their discs vertically like vinyl records on purpose-built shelves, and spoke about aspect ratios and letterboxing at dinner parties while their guests nodded politely, finished their pasta, and wondered why anyone would spend $40 on a disc that had to be flipped like a pancake. Number 46. Just Say No merchandise. Nancy Reagan's anti-drug campaign launched in 1982 and quickly evolved from a public health message into a merchandising empire that rivaled any toy franchise. Just Say No appeared on t-shirts, buttons, bumper stickers, pencils, rulers, lunchboxes, baseball caps, wristbands, and posters that hung in every school hallway and guidance counselor's office in the country. Schools distributed Just Say No bookmarks with every library visit. Girl Scout troops organized Just Say No rallies. Youth groups held Just Say No walkathons. The phrase was printed so widely and repeated so often that it became wallpaper, present everywhere and absorbed by almost nobody. Children who wore the t-shirts to school could not have told you what specific drugs they were saying no to, or what those drugs did, or why someone might say yes in the first place. The campaign's actual impact on drug use was debatable at best, but its impact on the t-shirt printing industry was measurable and significant. Number 45. Dare t-shirts as fashion statements. The Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program placed uniformed police officers in elementary school classrooms to teach fifth graders about the dangers of drugs, alcohol, and peer pressure. At the end of the program, Every child who completed the curriculum received a DARE t-shirt, and wearing it became an immediate badge of completion and belonging. The shirts were black with the distinctive red and white DARE logo across the chest. Kids wore them to school, to the park, to sleepovers, and to family dinners. Parents wore them to mow the lawn. The shirts were free, which made them some of the most widely distributed garments in 1980s America. The irony that the program's t-shirts would later become popular as ironic fashion statements among college students and young adults, the very demographic it was originally designed to protect, was not something the program's designers anticipated. By the 2000s, a vintage DARE shirt at a thrift store was a sly joke. No Meticulously. In 1988, it was dead serious. Number 44. The Mall Photo Booth. A small enclosed booth, usually tucked near the food court or beside the arcade entrance, with a padded bench inside, a curtain for privacy, and a camera that took 4 consecutive photos in rapid succession. You fed it quarters, usually $1 or $1.50, arranged your face, and the light flashed 4 times. 90 seconds later, a strip of 4 wallet-sized photos slid out of a slot at the bottom, slightly warm and smelling faintly of chemicals. The pictures were always slightly off, eyes half closed in the second frame, mouths caught mid-word in the third. 2 friends crammed into a booth designed for 1 person, pressing their faces together and making expressions they would find hilarious for approximately 48 hours before the photo strip ended up crumpled in a backpack pocket or stuck to a bedroom mirror with tape. The booth smelled like warm developing fluid and stale popcorn from the food court next door. The photos faded within a year if left in sunlight. None of that diminished their status as essential documentation of every mall visit. Number 43. Who shot JR? The question consumed America for 8 months in 1980 and 1981. J.R. Ewing, the villain of the CBS television show Dallas, was shot in the season finale on March 21, 1980, and the identity of the shooter was not revealed until November 21st of that year. Between, the question became a genuine national obsession on a scale that no fictional event had achieved before. Bumper stickers appeared on cars in every state. T-shirts were printed by the thousands. Betting pools were organized in offices, bars, churches, factory break rooms, and school cafeterias. Las Vegas bookmakers set odds on the shooter's identity, and the odds shifted week by week as new theories circulated. International media covered the speculation. The Turkish parliament briefly recessed because members wanted to watch the episode. The Queen Mother was reportedly asked for her theory. The episode revealing the answer drew over 83 million viewers, making it the most watched television broadcast in American history at that time. To put that number in perspective, roughly 3 out of every 4 television sets in the country were tuned to the same channel at the same moment. Fictional characters' attempted murder had united the country in a way that actual news events rarely managed. The answer, when it came, was satisfying enough that nobody who had waited 8 months felt cheated by it. The cultural impact went far beyond ratings. Who Shot JR? Proved that a single television cliffhanger could dominate the national conversation for the better part of a year, and every network drama that followed spent the next 2 decades trying to replicate the trick. None of them succeeded on the same scale. Number 42. The Sunken Living Room. A living room set a few steps below the rest of the house, separated from adjacent rooms by a short flight of 2 or 3 stairs. The sunken living room was a design statement that said the homeowner had both taste and the budget to pour a concrete floor at 2 different elevations. The furniture was usually low-slung. The carpet was usually shag. The conversation pit in the center was designed for socializing but mostly served as a place for children to trip and fall. Building codes eventually turned against the sunken living room because of the fall hazard, the difficulty of wheelchair access, and the structural complications it introduced. But for a stretch of the late 1970s and into the 1980s, asking the architect to drop your living room a few steps was the most prestigious thing you could do with a floor plan. Number 41. The Home Wet Bar. a small built-in bar installed in the den, the basement, or occasionally the living room of a suburban house. It had a laminate countertop, a few shelves for bottles, a small sink with running water, and sometimes a mini refrigerator underneath. The home wet bar suggested that the homeowner was the kind of person who entertained frequently and mixed drinks for guests. In reality, most home wet bars were used to store dusty bottles of liqueur that nobody drank, holiday cards from 3 years ago, and a cocktail shaker that had never been shaken. The bar stools were decorative. The ice bucket was empty. The entire setup existed as a performance of sophistication that was rarely, if ever, performed. Number 40. Perming children's hair. Not teenagers, children. Elementary school children sat in salon chairs while hairdressers wound their hair around small plastic rods, applied a chemical solution that smelled like ammonia mixed with burnt rubber, and waited for the process to set. The result was a head full of tight curls on a 7-year-old who had not asked for them and would spend the next 3 months looking like a miniature poodle. School photos from 1986 are full of second graders with perms. Boys got them too. The chemicals stung the scalp. The smell lingered in the car on the ride home. And yet parents signed their children up for the procedure as if it were as routine as a flu shot. Number 39. Collecting baseball cards as a serious financial investment. In the 1980s, the childhood hobby of collecting baseball cards transformed from a casual pastime involving shoeboxes and rubber bands into a speculative market with all the characteristics of a financial bubble. Adults bought sealed cases of unopened card boxes and stored them in climate-controlled rooms alongside important documents and family jewelry. Beckett Baseball Card Monthly published price guides that were studied with the intensity and seriousness of stock market reports and mutual fund prospectuses. Individual cards were professionally graded on a 10-point scale, sleeved in rigid plastic holders, and locked in bank safety deposit boxes. A mint-condition rookie card of the right player was treated as a genuine financial instrument, an asset that would only appreciate over time. The belief was sincere and widespread. The market crashed in the early 1990s when multiple card companies flooded the market with overproduced sets that destroyed the scarcity the price structure depended on. And millions of dollars worth of carefully preserved, humidity-controlled, acid-free sleeved cardboard became worth pennies on the dollar overnight. Entire collections that families had treated as retirement savings ended up at garage sales priced to move. Number 38. The pet ferret trend. Ferrets became fashionable domestic pets in the 1980s, despite the fact that they were illegal to own in several major states and cities, including California and New York City, and despite the fact that they exhibited almost none of the qualities traditionally associated with good household pets. They were sold in pet stores alongside hamsters and parakeets, carried around in jacket pockets and backpack pouches, and allowed to roam free in apartments where they immediately began stealing and hoarding car keys, loose coins, socks, silverware, and anything else small enough to drag under the refrigerator or behind the couch. Ferret owners were devoted beyond reason. They bought miniature harnesses and walked their ferrets in public parks alongside people walking dogs, who looked at the ferrets with visible confusion. They formed local ferret clubs and organized ferret shows with categories and ribbons. The animals smelled strongly of musk no matter how frequently they were bathed, nipped fingers with a bite force that drew blood, and slept for up to 18 hours a day, which made them, by any objective measure, terrible pets for the average household. None of this discouraged the trend. Number 37. Personalized airbrushed t-shirts. At every boardwalk, county fair, and tourist trap in the 1980s, there was a booth where an artist with an airbrush gun would spray paint your name, a sunset, a dolphin, or a muscle car onto a plain white t-shirt while you waited. The artist worked fast, usually finishing in under 10 minutes, and the results ranged from genuinely impressive to barely legible. The shirts cost $5 to $15 depending on the complexity of the design. Glitter was extra, Everyone who visited a beach town in the 1980s came home with at least one airbrushed shirt that they wore proudly for a single summer and then lost to the back of the closet. Number 36. Country goose decor. Wooden or ceramic geese, dressed in bonnets, aprons, or seasonal outfits, stationed by front doors and in kitchens across suburban America. The geese stood about 2 feet tall and were accessorized like dolls. At Christmas, they wore Santa hats. At Easter, they wore bunny ears. Some homeowners built entire wardrobes for their porch goose. The trend originated in country craft fairs and spread through home decorating magazines until it became one of the defining visual signatures of the 1980s American home. Having a goose by your front door dressed in a tiny raincoat on a rainy day was not considered eccentric. It was considered charming. Number 35. The Frankie Says Relax t-shirt. Frankie Says Relax, referencing the British band Frankie Goes to Hollywood and their 1984 hit Relax. The song was banned by the BBC for its suggestive content, which only increased its popularity. The t-shirt became one of the most recognized garments of the decade. Millions of people wore it. Most of them had never heard the song. Many did not know who Frankie was. The shirt functioned less as band merchandise and more as a cultural uniform, a way of signaling that you were aware of what was happening in popular culture even if you had no idea what the shirt was actually about. Number 34. Z Cavarici pants. High-waisted, pleated, tapered trousers with a distinctive logo patch on the hip. They were imported from Italy and sold at premium prices in American department stores. The fit was aggressively high-waisted, and the pleats were so deep they created a ballooning effect around the hips that tapered dramatically to a narrow ankle. The look was popular among teenagers who wanted to project European sophistication while standing in the parking lot of a strip mall in New Jersey. The brand peaked in the late 1980s and collapsed so rapidly that the name itself became a punchline by 1993. The pants are one of the decade's most visually distinctive fashion casualties. Number 33. Guess jeans obsession. The brand launched in 1981 with a marketing campaign built entirely on black and white photographs of models in suggestive poses. The jeans were stonewashed, tight-fitting, and marked by a small, triangle-shaped logo on the back pocket. Owning a pair of Guess jeans in the 1980s placed you in a specific social category. They cost significantly more than Levi's. They were displayed prominently in department store windows. The advertising was provocative enough to generate regular complaints, but effective enough to make Guess one of the fastest-growing fashion brands of the decade. The triangle logo became a status symbol that communicated taste, budget, and a willingness to pay extra for a label. Number 32. Wearing multiple pairs of scrunched socks at once. Not one pair, 2 or 3 pairs, layered in different colors, pushed down and scrunched around the ankles to create a thick, multicolored ring of cotton above the sneaker. The look required careful coordination. The outer pair had to be a contrasting color. The scrunch had to be even. Some kids safety pinned the socks together to prevent them from separating throughout the school day. The amount of engineering that went into making 3 pairs of socks look casually disheveled was considerable, and nobody acknowledged the contradiction. The look was everywhere in 1987, gone by 1991, and has never returned. Number 31. The jean jacket covered in pins and patches. A standard denim jacket transformed into a wearable scrapbook. Concert pins, band patches, enamel buttons with slogans, flags, and cartoon characters covered every inch of available fabric. Some jackets were so heavily decorated that the original denim was barely visible. The weight of the pins and patches made the jacket noticeably heavier. Putting it on was like suiting up in soft armor. Taking it off at the end of the day left impressions in your shoulders from the pinbacks. The jacket was a personal statement, a portable gallery, and an ongoing project that was never truly finished. Number 30. Headbands as everyday fashion. Not for exercise, not for keeping hair out of your eyes during a run, as a fashion accessory worn to school, to the mall. and to dinner. Olivia Newton-John wore one in the physical music video, and the entire country followed. Headbands came in terry cloth, satin, leather, and plastic. They were neon. They were rhinestoned. They were worn across the forehead like a sweatband, or pushed back into the hairline like an Alice band. Men wore them. Women wore them. Children wore them. For roughly 5 years, a strip of fabric wrapped around the skull was considered a finishing touch to any outfit, regardless of whether the wearer had recently exercised or planned to. Number 29. The roller skating rink as teenage social headquarters. Before the internet, before the mall became the default, the roller skating rink was where a generation of American teenagers went to be seen. Friday and Saturday nights belonged to the rink. The floor was hardwood or polished concrete. The lights were low except during the disco ball segments, when colored lights swept across the walls and the DJ played Donna Summer or Michael Jackson at a volume that made conversation impossible. Couples skated during couples-only songs, which was the 1980s equivalent of a slow dance, and carried roughly the same emotional weight. Asking someone to skate during the couples song was a public declaration. Being turned down was a public humiliation. The snack bar sold nachos with liquid cheese, slush puppies, and candy bars. The carpet in the non-skating areas was a geometric pattern in colors that existed nowhere else in nature, browns and oranges and greens arranged in shapes that looked like a mathematics textbook had collided with a lava lamp. The bathrooms smelled like industrial disinfectant and rental shoe spray. The rental skates were tan leather with orange wheels and had been worn by hundreds of feet before yours, a fact you tried not to think about as you laced them up. And every weekend, hundreds of teenagers laced up four-wheeled skates and circled the floor in an endless loop, passing each other, falling in love with each other, and occasionally crashing into each other at speeds that left bruises for a week. The rink was democratic. Rich kids and poor kids skated the same floor. The only hierarchy was skill. If you could skate backward, you were royalty. If you fell during the limbo, you were the entertainment. By the early 1990s, most rinks had closed or converted to other uses, and the particular brand of public humiliation and romance they offered vanished with them. Number 28. The Pogo Ball. A small rubber ball trapped between two plastic platforms that you stood on and bounced. It was marketed as the next big outdoor toy. The reality was that balancing on it required the coordination of a gymnast, and most children fell off within 5 seconds. The bounce was unpredictable. The landing was hard. Skinned knees were guaranteed. The Pogo Ball was sold with images of smiling children bouncing effortlessly down sidewalks, a scenario that almost never occurred in real life. Most Pogo Balls ended up under a bush in the backyard within 2 weeks of purchase, deflating slowly in the rain. Number 27. Skip It. A toy that attached to one ankle and swung in a circle while you hopped over it with the other foot. The original version was a simple plastic ball on a string. Later versions added a counter that tracked how many times you skipped. The bruises on the ankle holding the toy were immediate and consistent. Every child who used a Skip It developed a dark purple ring around the ankle bone within the first hour. The toy was marketed with a jingle so aggressively catchy that people who have not heard it since 1988 can still sing it on command. The Skip It was simultaneously one of the simplest and most physically punishing toys of the decade. Number 26. Sit and Spin. A flat plastic disc with a central post that a child sat on and spun by turning the post. The faster you turned, the faster you spun, and the dizzier you got. There was no braking mechanism. There was no speed limit. The child controlled the rotation entirely, which meant the toy's primary function was to make small children so dizzy they could not walk. Parents placed it in living rooms and playrooms and watched their toddlers spin until they tipped over sideways onto the carpet. The Sit and Spin offered children their first experience of self-induced vertigo, and most of them came back for more. Number 25. Stretch Armstrong. A large, blonde, muscular action figure filled with corn syrup that could be pulled, twisted, and stretched to several times its original length and then slowly returned to its normal shape. The appeal was entirely tactile. There was no game, there was no story. You just pulled it as far as it would go and watched it retract. Eventually, every stretch Armstrong developed a small tear, and the corn syrup inside began leaking out in a slow, sticky stream that ruined carpet, upholstery, and anything else it touched. The toy was designed to be abused, and it was. Kids pulled it between two people, tied it in knots, and left it stretched across door frames. The corn syrup filling was discovered only when the figure finally ruptured, which was always a surprise and never a pleasant one. Number 24. Big wheels and green machines. Low-slung plastic tricycles with oversized front wheels and a seat positioned just inches off the ground. The big wheel was the standard model. The green machine had a lever-based steering system on the rear wheels that allowed the rider to spin out. The sound of a big wheel on a concrete sidewalk was a grinding roar that could be heard 3 houses away. Kids rode them down driveways, into streets, and off curbs with no helmets, no knee pads, and no fear. The front wheel wore down until the plastic was so thin it cracked, and the whole vehicle was replaced with a new one. The average lifespan of a big wheel was 1 summer. Number 23. The Home Perm Kit. Ogilvy, Tony, Lilt. Names that smelled like ammonia just by saying them out loud. The kit came with small plastic rods, rubber bands, a bottle of perm solution, and a neutralizer. The process took 2 hours, stank up the entire house, and produced results that ranged from soft waves to a tightly coiled disaster that took months to grow out. Millions of American women permed their own hair at home rather than paying a salon. The bathroom smelled like chemicals for days afterward. The towels were stained. The rods ended up in the junk drawer. And the curls, when they worked, lasted about 6 weeks before flattening into a frizzy memory of the shape they were supposed to hold. Number 22. Aquanet Hairspray. A can of aerosol hairspray so powerful it could hold a hairstyle in place through a windstorm. The brand was the undisputed champion of 1980s hair maintenance. Women used it, men used it, teenagers used half a can before school every morning. The cloud of Aquanet that followed an application hung in the bathroom for minutes, coating the mirror, the countertop, and the inside of the lungs with a fine, sticky mist. It was flammable. People used it near curling irons and hot rollers without hesitation. The ozone layer took the hit. Environmental concerns eventually led to reformulated, non-aerosol versions, but for the heart of the 1980s, Aquanet was the glue that held the decade's most ambitious hairstyles together. Number 21. Clear phones. Transparent telephones with visible wiring, circuit boards, and internal components on full display. The clear phone served no functional advantage. The same components existed in every opaque telephone on the market. But seeing the inner workings of a telephone while talking on it was, for a brief cultural moment, thrilling. They were sold in every electronics store and in the back pages of every teen magazine. Kids hung them on bedroom walls and watched the ringer mechanism vibrate when a call came in. The trend was part of a broader 1980s fascination with transparency, which also produced clear backpacks, clear calculators, and clear cassette tapes, as if seeing the insides of an object made it more honest. Number 20. Mood rings. A ring with a thermochromic stone that changed color based on the temperature of the wearer's finger. Blue meant calm, green meant normal, black meant stressed or cold. The rings were originally a 1970s fad, but they experienced a strong revival in the 1980s and were sold at every gift shop, county, fair, and mall kiosk in the country. Children wore them with absolute faith in their accuracy, interpreting every color shift as a genuine emotional reading. The stones cracked easily, turned permanently black when exposed to water, and cost less than $2. None of this undermined their authority. A mood ring said you were anxious and you believed it. Number 19. The keytar. A synthesizer keyboard shaped like a guitar, strapped over the shoulder and played while standing, walking, or leaping across a concert stage. The keytar solved a problem that keyboard players had complained about for decades, being stuck behind a stationary instrument while the guitarist and singer got all the stage movement. The solution was a portable keyboard that looked like a prop from a science fiction movie. Keytars appeared in countless 1980s music videos and concert performances. Bands from every genre used them. The sight of a grown adult wearing a strap-on keyboard and playing it with the intensity of a lead guitarist was, even in the 1980s, visually confusing. By the early 1990s, the keytar had retreated to novelty status, and keyboardists went back behind their desks. Number 18. Hands Across America. On May 25, 1986, roughly 5 million Americans attempted to form a continuous human chain stretching from New York City to Long Beach, California. The goal was to raise money and awareness for hunger and homelessness in the United States. Participants paid $10 for the privilege of standing in a line and holding hands with strangers for 15 minutes. Celebrities stood in the line alongside office workers and retirees. Ronald Reagan held hands on the White House lawn. Kenny Rogers and Yoko Ono participated. The chain was not continuous. There were gaps across rural stretches of the Midwest where nobody lived close enough to the route, gaps through the deserts of the Southwest where the heat made standing outside for 15 minutes a medical risk, and gaps anywhere the population density could not support a line of people standing shoulder to shoulder for miles. Some gaps were filled by stretched ropes or ribbons. Others were simply acknowledged and quietly ignored by the organizers. The event raised about $15 million after expenses were deducted, which was significantly less than the tens of millions the organizers had projected and barely covered the costs of permits, logistics, portable toilets, and the massive advertising campaign that preceded it. The logistics of coordinating millions of people to stand in a single line across a 3,000-mile continent were predictably overwhelming. But for those 15 minutes, in the places where the chain actually connected, something genuinely strange happened. Strangers held hands on highway shoulders, in parking lots, and on suburban sidewalks. Children stood between their parents and people they had never met and would never see again. The national anthem played on portable radios, and some people cried. Nobody could explain afterward exactly why they had cried. The whole event was beautiful, absurd, logistically impossible, and profoundly American in its belief that a gesture of connection, even an incomplete one, was worth the effort and the $10. Number 17. Live Aid and Benefit Concert Obsession. On July 13, 1985, two simultaneous concerts in London and Philadelphia were broadcast globally to raise money for famine relief in Ethiopia. Nearly 2 billion people watched on television. The concerts ran for 16 hours and featured nearly every major rock and pop act of the era performing live. The event raised tens of millions of dollars and established the template for every benefit concert that followed. For a brief period in the mid-1980s, the belief that rock concerts could solve geopolitical crises was sincere and widespread. Charity singles, benefit albums, and awareness campaigns flooded the music industry. Celebrities recording group songs in studios became a recurring event. Yet the optimism was enormous, the logistics were chaotic, and the lasting impact was debated for decades. Number 16. Wearing concert t-shirts inside out. A trend that emerged in the mid-1980s and persisted for several years without anyone offering a clear explanation for why it happened. Kids bought concert t-shirts at shows or at the mall and then wore them with the printed side facing inward and the blank tag showing side facing out. The theory, to the extent there was one, was that it looked cooler, or that it was an anti-fashion statement, or that it proved you actually attended the concert because you were too cool to advertise it. The practice was common enough that it was unremarkable in most high schools by 1988 and baffling in retrospect by 1995. Number 15. Tupperware parties, a social gathering organized in someone's living room where a Tupperware sales representative demonstrated plastic food storage containers while guests ate finger sandwiches and were expected to place orders. The parties were part product demonstration, part social obligation, and part guilt-driven commerce. Turning down a purchase felt like insulting the host. The containers themselves were durable, well-designed, and available in colors that matched nothing in any existing kitchen. Women who hosted Tupperware parties earned a percentage of the sales, which created a mild but persistent pressure to invite friends to future parties. The model was so successful that it defined an entire category of home-based sales that lasted for decades. Number 14. Mary Kay Pink Cadillacs. The cosmetics company awarded top-performing sales consultants the use of a pink Cadillac. The car was not a metaphor. It was a real, full-sized factory pink Cadillac that the consultant drove to grocery stores, school pickups, and church on Sunday. Seeing a pink Cadillac in a suburban driveway meant one of two things. Either the homeowner was the most successful Mary Kay consultant in the neighborhood, or someone had made a very unusual personal choice. The cars became one of the most visible symbols of direct sales success in the 1980s, and they turned a private business achievement into a public spectacle that was impossible to miss at a four-way stop. Number 13. Avon Calling. A door-to-door cosmetic sales model in which a local Avon representative, usually a neighbor, rang your doorbell, handed you a catalog the size of a small phone book, and returned a week later to collect your order. The transaction was personal. The representative knew your name, your skin type, and how many daughters you had. The catalogs were browsed at kitchen tables. Orders were written on small paper forms. Payment was by check or cash handed over at the front door. Avon representatives were everywhere. In some neighborhoods, every third house had one. The model worked because it was built on trust, proximity, and the mild, social pressure of saying no to someone who lived on your street. Number 12. The home computer as an expensive toy nobody understood. The Commodore 64 arrived in 1982. The Apple IIe followed. The IBM PC was already on desks in offices, and suburban families started buying home computers without a clear idea of what they would do with them. The machines sat on desks in spare bedrooms and dens, glowing green or amber, waiting to be used. Fathers justified the purchase by saying it would help the children with schoolwork. The children used it to play games. Mothers avoided it entirely, regarding the machine with the same suspicion they might direct at a new household appliance whose instruction manual was written in a foreign language, which in a sense it was. The instruction manuals were thick, dense, and written in a vocabulary that assumed the reader already understood what a command prompt was, what a floppy disk directory looked like, and why saving a file required typing a specific sequence of characters in a specific order. Loading a program from a cassette tape took minutes of waiting while the screen displayed a blinking cursor and the tape player made sounds like a fax machine drowning. Loading one from a floppy disk was faster but still required typing commands that felt like negotiating with the machine. Typing load *8 1 into a Commodore 64 and waiting for the screen to respond was a ritual that combined hope, confusion, and the faint suspicion that the machine was smarter than you were. Computer magazines advertised programs you could type in yourself, line by line, from printed code in the magazine. A single typo in 300 lines of BASIC meant the program crashed and you had no idea why. Some families used the computer for word processing. A few learned programming. Most let it sit on the desk accumulating dust and the quiet guilt of an expensive purchase that never delivered on its promise. And when the next model came out, some of those families bought that one too, for the same reasons, with the same results. Number 11. Mall walking. Senior citizens discovered that enclosed shopping malls, with their climate-controlled environments, flat surfaces, and predictable layouts, were ideal places to walk for exercise. Mall walking programs appeared across the country. Malls opened their doors early, before stores opened, specifically to accommodate walkers. Groups of seniors in sneakers and windbreakers circled the corridors in organized packs, passing shuttered storefronts and sleeping food courts at 7 in the morning. Some malls posted distance markers, others organized walking clubs with membership cards and t-shirts. The mall, designed as a temple of commerce, became a fitness facility for people who had no intention of buying anything. Number 10. Dedicated waterbed stores. Not a section of a furniture store, not a display in the corner of a mattress shop. An entire retail location selling nothing but waterbeds, waterbed frames, waterbed heaters, waterbed sheets, and waterbed conditioner, which was a chemical you poured into the mattress to prevent algae from growing inside the vinyl bag you slept on. These stores existed in strip malls across the country. They had names like Waterbed City and the Waterbed Warehouse. The salespeople could explain the difference between a free-flow mattress and a waveless mattress with the conviction of a sommelier discussing vintages. The stores disappeared almost entirely by the mid-1990s, along with the beds themselves, and the idea that millions of Americans once slept on heated bags of chemically treated water now sounds like something from a parallel universe. Number 9. Getting your colors done. A beauty consulting trend based on the book Color Me Beautiful, published in 1980, which argued that every person fell into one of 4 seasonal categories: spring, summer, autumn, or winter, and that wearing the right colors for your season would make you look younger, healthier, and more attractive. Consultants held fabric swatches against your face under specific lighting conditions and declared your season with the authority of a medical diagnosis. Once assigned, you were expected to shop, dress, and accessorize exclusively within your seasonal palette. Women carried color swatch fans in their purses for reference while shopping. The entire concept rested on a classification system that was roughly as scientific as a horoscope, but it was taken with a seriousness that would have embarrassed an astrologer. Number 8. The Nordic Track Ski Machine. A wooden-framed cross-country skiing simulator that sat in the living room, the basement, or the spare bedroom and made a rhythmic swooshing sound when used. The Nordic Track was marketed as the ultimate home fitness machine because it worked the entire body at once. Television infomercials showed fit, smiling people gliding effortlessly on the machine in their living rooms. The reality was that the coordinated arm and leg motion required to use the Nordic Track was so difficult to master that most owners gave up within a week. The machines were large, awkward to store, and impossible to move without help. They became the single most common piece of unused exercise equipment in the American home, surpassing even the stationary bicycle. Number 7. The Ab Roller. A small wheel with handles on either side that you gripped while kneeling on the floor and rolled forward until your body was nearly flat, then rolled back. The exercise was brutally effective and almost universally despised. The Ab Roller was sold through infomercials and in sporting goods stores for under $10, making it one of the cheapest fitness devices available. It required no batteries, no assembly, and no instruction beyond the obvious. Roll out, roll back. Repeat until your abdominal muscles stopped functioning. The simplicity was its genius and its curse. There was no way to cheat the Ab Roller. There was no comfortable version. There was only the wheel, the floor, and the burning realization that your core was weaker than you thought. Number 6. The DeLorean. A stainless steel sports car with gull-wing doors manufactured by John DeLorean in a factory in Northern Ireland. The car was underpowered, unreliable, and far too expensive for what it delivered. Fewer than 9,000 were ever built before the company went bankrupt. Then Back to the Future came out in 1985, and the DeLorean became the most famous car in the world. A failed automobile was transformed into a cultural icon by a single movie. DeLorean owners, who had been driving a car most people had never heard of, suddenly found themselves approached by strangers asking if the car could really travel through time. The answer was no. The car could barely travel through an intersection without stalling. Number 5. Trivial Pursuit. A board game that turned knowing useless facts into a competitive sport. The game launched in 1982 and became the fastest-selling board game in history. Dinner parties revolved around it. Family arguments erupted over disputed answers. A game that rewarded obscure knowledge about geography, entertainment, science, and history made millions of Americans feel either brilliant or humiliated, depending on whether they drew a question about literature or sports. Special editions for every possible category appeared within 2 years. The game sold over 20 million copies in its first year in North America and changed what board games could be by proving that adults would play them if the stakes were purely intellectual and the humiliation was public enough. Number 4. Pictionary, a drawing-based guessing game that exposed the artistic abilities, or complete lack thereof, of every person at the table. One player drew, the others guessed, the timer ran down. The drawings ranged from recognizable to genuinely disturbing. Stick figures, lopsided circles, and what appeared to be a crime scene were all presented as clues to words like birthday or telephone. Pictionary parties were loud, competitive, and occasionally friendship-ending. Arguments about whether a drawing constituted cheating because it contained letters, or whether a guesser had said the right word but in the wrong tense, could escalate to a volume that alarmed the neighbors. The game sold millions and turned living rooms into galleries of accidental abstract art. Nobody who played it ever claimed to be good at drawing afterward, and the drawings themselves, found weeks later on discarded pads of paper, were completely incomprehensible without context. Number 3. Monogramming everything. Initials embroidered, engraved, or stamped onto towels, bathrobes, sweaters, handbags, luggage, stationery, and coffee mugs. The 1980s monogram craze turned personalization into a status marker. A plain bath towel was a bath towel. A bath towel with your initials in gold thread was a statement. Monogramming services appeared in department stores, gift shops, and mall kiosks. Christmas gifts were not considered complete without the recipient's initials stitched somewhere visible. The trend suggested that Americans were so concerned about losing their possessions that they needed their names permanently affixed to everything they owned, or that they simply enjoyed seeing their own initials on every surface within arm's reach. Number 2. The Epilady, electric hair removal device from Israel that hit the American market in 1986 and sold over 1 million units in its first year. The device used a rotating coil spring that trapped hairs and ripped them out at the root. The marketing promised smooth, long-lasting results. The experience delivered screaming, tears, and a pain so memorable that people discussed it decades later with a look in their eyes normally reserved for combat veterans. The Epilady worked exactly as advertised. It removed hair. It did so by grabbing each individual hair and tearing it from the body at high speed, one after another, for as long as you could stand it. Most people could stand it for about 30 seconds. Number 1. The home tanning bed. A personal ultraviolet radiation chamber installed in a spare bedroom, a basement, or a corner of the garage. Commercial tanning salons were already widespread, but the 1980s push for year-round bronzed skin created a market for home units that allowed unlimited tanning without leaving the house. The beds were expensive, heavy, and required dedicated electrical circuits. Users lay inside with goggles on, surrounded by fluorescent tubes emitting concentrated ultraviolet light for anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes at a time. The devices came with warnings about overexposure. The warnings were universally ignored. Having a tanning bed at home was considered a luxury, a sign that you took your appearance seriously and had the disposable income to pursue a year-round tan from the privacy of your own home. The connection between ultraviolet radiation and skin cancer was known, but not yet culturally absorbed, and the idea that people were voluntarily lying inside what amounted to a glowing coffin of radiation several times a week now ranks among the stranger health choices the decade produced. 100 obsessions, and every single one of them felt completely reasonable while it lasted. That is what the 1980s did better than any other decade. They made the strange feel normal, the excessive feel necessary, and the temporary feel permanent. If you wore the shirt, ate the Pop Rocks, called the number, or stood in line for the doll, you were not unusual. You were everyone. Share this with someone who remembers. Like the video if any of these brought something back. And if you have not already, subscribe because there is more where this came from.